All right, Surface Transportation 115229. Request for the public second tape. Request for public use condition with the Title 49 years ago 1095 with the being with the rate with the chef with the condition itself over the public interest of humans importance of the condition with the period of the time of the which the condition must be effective with a share statutory maximum of 180 days. Justification imposition time period with a copy of the request shall be mailed with the applicant with the application filed with the part with 1152 subpart C with the request for the public of the use of the condition must be filed with no more than 45 days with the applicant for the file with the decision of the public request measure if you the board of the director offer the proceed with the effective date of the ban the example of the paragraph 1152 subpart F of the exemption of the grant with the basis of the individual position for exemption of the file with the title 49 and 1052 with the request of the public use of the condition must be filed within that 20 days of the day of the public with no exemption of the federal register and the case of the exemption of the part F with this right no more than 20 days of the day of the publication of the filing of the position individual exemption of the federal register. If the board filed with the rail with the property to property use of the other public purpose of the railroad may dispose of the rail property with the properties only with the under the condition of the described in the board decision. The condition imposed with the board may include with the proposition again for the disposal of the rail after this period no more later than 100 days effective the day of the decision authorizing the ban of the discontinuance left the property to have then first offered with the reasonable with the sale of the public purpose of the running concurrently with any of the other postponement in the jurisdiction of the public the impose such conditions expire after 100 days after the effective day of the decision authorizing the ban of the discontinuancy. 115229 prospective use of the rights of the way of the interment of the trail use of the rail banking. If any state of the public subdivision qualified with the private organization interested in acquiring with the use of the right of way of the rail line and both of the ban with the interment of the trail use of the rail banking the pursuant to Title 16 U.S. Standard Code 1247 with the deed that must be filed with the commitment. The other was include with the request of the filing the regulated abandonment. Proceed with the position exemption for the proceeding, indicating that it would be if due so the comment the request of the position must include a map depicting the accurate with the description right away with a portion of the area of the including the milepost of the proposed to be acquired and used. Statement indicating with the trail sponsor the willingness used to assume the full responsibility for managing a right away with any legal liability arising of the transfer of the right with unless the immune with liability with and you did not identify with the railroad against an potential liability. Through your payment, any of the taxes levied against the right of way of the acknowledgement of the interim of the trail, you're subject with the sponsor continue with me with the responsible described in paragraph A2 of the section subject with the possible future of the reconstruction reactivation of the right of way rail serve with the statement that must be following terms and it shows the statement of willing to assume the financial responsibility and then it gives a right where it has to be wrote in writing. B1 abandonment application for the proceeding of Title 49 use 1093 with the aim of the term for the trail that you with the statement that due within 45 days of the protest of the comment with the comment application is filed with the sheet 115225C with the application with care with the response with notifying the board wherever they would with the intent of the negotiate with the trail use the agreement to do within 15 days after the close of the protest of the comment period and 60 days after the abandonment of the application then filed with every proceeding where the trails acts request is made with the board will determine whether the trails acts is applicable. If the Trails Act is not applicable, will be covered if they comply with the 115229A or is applicable to the carrier either does not intend with the negotiated agreement but does not timely notify the board intention with the negotiated the decision the merits will be issued with the certificate of the interim trail use the ban with it or CITU will be issued with the care with the will be with the negotiated with the agreement with the public advance with the necessity of the permit with the ban of the board of the certificate interim of the trail use of the abandonment. An exemption proceeding with the petition contained with the interim of the trail use of the statement within 10 days after the date of the following notice of the exemption with the published with the Federal Register within case of this class of the exemption within 20 days of the publication of the Federal Register notice of the filing with the position exemption with the case of the position exemption within the interim trail use of the commandment with the position is filed with exemption seeing the railroads reply with the board and indicating whether with whom it intended with the negotiated agreement to do within 10 days after the day of the position requesting interim trail use file. Late file with trail use statement that must be supported by the statement that's showing good call for the late filing. Regarding abandonment of the proceeding, the if continue with the rail service that does not occur with the pursuing of the Title 49 U.S. Content 94, 10, and 11, 52, 27. Railroad agree with the negotiated interim trail use of the rail banking agreement of the board will be issued with the CITU with the railroad, the interim of the trail sponsor the portion of the right-of-way with which the both parties will negotiate with the CITU will permit the railroad discontinue the issue with the cancelability of applicable tariffs to sell the track material constant with the interim trail use of the rail banking as long as consistent with any other board order of the 30 days after the CITU's issue permit with the railroad fully abandoned the line with its no trail use agreement with the reach in 180 days after the CITU issue the subject of the appropriate condition including with labor protection environmental protection. Alright, your certificate in term of the trail youth abandonment will indicate with the aim of the term of the trail, the subject of the future for the restoration, rail service, of the responsibility, continue with the meet with the responsibility described in paragraph the A2 of the section. Certificate of the interim trail used and abandonment will be provided with the interim trail with the agreement that reach for the depth of the interim trail will be used to establish a party with the shell of the notes described in the paragraph H of the section. Additionally, with the CITU, the certificate of an interim trail used and abandonment, the provide with the response for the intent with the terminate with the interim trail used on all over the portion right away with the cover of the interim trail use agreement. If it must be board with the certificate interim trail use and request of the trail vacated with the specified date with the party with the request of the certificate interim trail use of the baby vacated only portion of the right away. Board will issue the appropriate replacement of the certificate interim trail use and covering the remaining portion of the right-of-way subject to the interim trail use agreement. The board will reopening of the abandonment the proceeding validate the certificate interim trail use and issue a decision permitting the immediate abandonment that involves the portion of the right-of-way with a copy of the decision will be sent. The abandonment of the applicant for the owner of the right-of-way with the current trail sponsor for the applicant for the construct for the operative of the rail line with the right-of-way with the author of the Title 49 U.S. Code 1091, Title 49 1150 of the exemption of the Title 49 1052 of certificate interim trail use will be vacated accordingly. Exempted abandonment of the proceedings. If it continues rail service, the design occurred with the Title 49 U.S. Code 1094 and 1152 27 of the railroad agree with the negotiated interim trail use railway banking agreement with the board will issue the notice for the intent trail use with the abandonment of the railroad to the right of way with the both of the parties willing to negotiate the notice for the interim trail use permit railroad can discontinue the cancel the applicable tariff of the sale of the track material of the consent of the interim track rail use rail banking as long with the consistency of the board or bank or board order 30 days after the day of the notice of the intent interim trail use and abandonment or abandonment is issued. The permit of the railroad fully abandon the line agreement to reach 180 days after the notice of an interim trail use and abandonment, subject to the appropriate conditions, including labor protection, environmental matters. Notice of the interim trail use and abandonment that indicate that the interim of the use of the subject of the future restoration of the rail for the responsibility of the continuing with the meet with the responsibility of the described in paragraph 18 of the section of the notice of an interim trail use will also provide with the interim trail use agreement that reach for the use of the interim trail with the use to establish the party shall file with the notice described in paragraph each of the section additional notice interim trail use will provide with the sponsor's intent with the terminate with the interim trail use and allow the aim of the portion right away cover the interim trail use agreement they must send with the order of the copy of the notice for the interim trail use and abandonment request for the vacated with the specified date of the parties request of the notice in term trail use vacated only portion of the right of way of the board will issue the appropriate replacement of the notice interim trail use covering the remaining portion of the right of way subject to the interim of the trail use of the agreement the board will reopen the exemption of the proceeding of the vacated of the notice interim trail use they issue the decision reinstating exemption of the portion of the right of way with a copy of the decision will be sent with the name of the exemption for the applicant for the owner of the right of way the current of the trail sponsor the applicant for the construction the operator of the rail line with the right of way of the authorized in Title 49 U.S. Code 1091 and Title 49 1150 or exempted in Title 49 U.S. Standard Code 1052 with the notice interim trail use and abandonment will be vacated in accordance. Where later filed with the statement of the except of the director for the designee with the telephone of the railroad determined with the abandonment of the being consummated if then more with the railroad willing to negotiate aim with the term trail using an agreement the railroad shall confirm with the writing with the responsible and in 5 days of the abandonment to have consummated the trailer you with the request of the dismissed the abandonment has not been consummated with the railroad refused to negotiate with the trail use will be denied the amendment to have not been consummated with the railroad willing to negotiate with the abandonment. The proceeding will be reopened. The abandonment the decision granting an application produce an exemption notice with the exemption will be vacated. The appropriate certificate interim trail use or notice of interim trail use will be issued. The effective certificate interim trail use notice of interim trail use will be the same as the day of the vacated decision note or notice. Alright, a railroad received authority from the board to abandon within the regulated amount of the preceding Title 49 U.S. Code 1093 with an individual class exemption issued to Title 49 U.S. Code 1050 shall file the notice of consumption of the board signify with the exercise authority granted with the fully abandoned the line with a discontinued operation solve with the track and the canceled tariff that intends property to be removed with the interstate rail network of the notice of the provided with the notice for the Surface Transportation Board proceeding the docket number of the brief description line of the statement. The railroad consuming the fully exercise of the abandonment of the authorized with a certain date with the notice of the shall be filed with 1 year of the service of the line with the decision permitting with the abandonment of the consuming of the railroad intent of the consuming of the abandonment with the notice of the deemed with the conclusion of the point of the consumption if there are no legal regulatory barriers to the consumption of the outlining conditions and 1 year. After 1 year of the day of the service of the decision of the permitting of the abandonment of the consumption of the non-effect of the railroad filing and the notice of the consumption, if there are no legal regulatory barrier for the consumption, the authority to abandon it automatically expire with the abandonment of the new proceeding with the would-be institute of the railroad was abandoned to the line. The copy of the railroad notice of consumption will be filed with the chief section of the administrator of the office of the proceeding additions. Notice of the consumption shall be sent with the State Public Service Commission. They are equivalent as every state with which the line passes. If, however, any legal regulatory barrier to consumption at the end of the 1 year time, the notice of the consumption must be filed with no later than 60 days after the satisfaction or the removal of the legal regulatory barrier for the goods and cause shown a railroad may file with the requested extension time of the notice if it does not sufficiently advise the expiration date and notifying the board of the consumption of the timely processing. F1. When the trailer intended to terminate with the trail used with another person intended to become the trail user by assuming the financial responsibility for the right-of-way of the existing and fully future trail user shall finally jointly copy the certificate interim trail user and notice interim trail user state a willingness to assume the financial responsibility with the new trail user. And 3. An acknowledgement of the interim trail use subject to the possible future reconstruction reactivation of the right-of-way of the rail service. Alright, 2. The parties shall indicate the date of the responsibility of the right-of-way of the transfer of the new trail of the user with the board will reopen and the abandonment of the exemption proceed with the verification with the existing notice of the interim trail use with the certificate or certificate in trail use issue appropriate to replay for the notice of the interim trail use or certificate of trail use new trail user. G. Proceeding where the timely trail user statement, if it's filed with either of the railroad, indicate the unwillingness to negotiate the interim of the use of the agreement, the failure to notify of the board with the willingness to negotiate the decision of the authority, abandonment of the exemption of the decision issued instead of the certificate interim trail user, notice of interim trail user, subsequent the railroad trail, but the proponent never determined to negotiate with the interim trail use of the agreement under the Trails Act. The railroad or trail proponent must file with a joint proceeding requesting with the appropriate certificate and notice of the interim trail use to be used. The abandonment that has not been consummated. The board will reopen the proceeding with the outstanding with the decision with the notice of the proportion thereof. There is an appropriate certificate and interim trail use notice. Interim trail use for the permit of the party to negotiate with the period agreed by the parties of their joint filing not exceeding 180 days at the end of the certificate interim trail user and the notice interim trail use to convert the decision of the notice of the permitting and abandonment. Alright, when the parties negotiating with the rail bank for the interim of the trail with the reach of the agreement with the trail spun for the railroad shall notify the board with the 10-day for the agreement with the reach of the notice shall include the map, the depiction, and accurate with the description involved with the right of way of the portion thereof, including the map over the subject of the party with the interim of the trail use of the agreement, the certificate including the provision requirement of the sponsor of the full of the responsibility described in paragraph A2 of the section additional with the interim trail use of the agreement established for the interim trail user over the reach of the right of way covered in the certificate of the trail use of the notice of the interim trail use of the notice shall include the request of the board vacate the certificate and interim trail use of the notice interim trail use with the issue the replacement certificate interim trail use notice interpreters on the right of way. Over the coverage with the interim trail use of the agreement, the board will reopen the abandonment of the proceeding, vacate the certificate and the interim trail use the notice of the interim trail use. If the appropriate replacement the certificate, interim trail use notice of the interim trail use railway covered with the interim trail use agreement, the decision permitting the immediate abandonment of the portion of the right of way of the subject of the interim trail use agreement. Copy of the decision will be sent with the rail car south with the abandonment of the authorization, the owner of the right of way, and the current trail sponsor. Subpart D, standard of determination of cost, revenues, and return on value.